Many thanks to all of our Patreon contributors. You too can become a contributor. Just go to patreon.com/thecyberwire and find out how. We do appreciate it. Thanks. Is the third man in the Shadow Brokers leak soon to be revealed? ISIS enters its diaspora phase. Monero miner targets Max. Google Play ejects apps with the Tizi backdoor. Scarab ransomware is blasted out in the spam campaign. Uber's value takes a hit post-breach disclosure. Barracuda Networks is taken private. Trend Micro buys Immunio. And the Pittsburgh FBI office takes another whack at Chinese industrial espionage. A few words from our sponsors at E8 Security. If you've been to any security conference over the past year, you've surely heard a lot about artificial intelligence and machine learning. We know we have. But E8 would like you to know that these aren't just buzzwords. They're real technologies, and they can help you derive meaning from what an overwhelmed human analyst would see as an impossible flood of data. Go to e8security.com/cyberwire and let their white paper guide you through the possibilities of these indispensable emerging technological tools. Remember, the buzz around artificial intelligence isn't about replacing humans. It's really about machine learning, a technology that's here today. So see what E8 has to say about it, and they promise you won't get a sales call from a robot. Learn more at e8security.com/cyberwire. And we thank E8 for sponsoring our show. Major funding for the CyberWire podcast is provided by Cylance. I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Tuesday, November 28, 2017. In a developing story that we'll be watching, Brian Krebs thinks he has a lead on who the unknown leaker was, whose device was looted for alleged NSA tools that found their way into the hands of the shadow brokers last year. It's too early to name individuals or companies, but the third person may become known before too much more time has passed. ISIS, effectively ejected from territory it once controlled, appears to be entering its long-anticipated diaspora phase, which informed observers expect to be marked by more focus on cyberspace. For the foreseeable future, this is held by most to mean increased attempts at online inspiration. There may be an attempt to re-establish a territorial sanctuary, possibly in the Philippines, and there are signs that the former caliphate may be trying to attract women to its cause, in part through online matrimonial appeals. Criminals continue their attempt on cryptocurrencies. Security company SentinelOne today announced their discovery of a new cryptocurrency mining Trojan, OS X CPU miner, that targets Max. It's after Monero cryptocurrency, and it appears, SentinelOne researchers say, to have borrowed some of the tactics and techniques used in the adware underground. Google's latest sweep through Google Play turns up several apps equipped with the Tizi backdoor. Tizi has typically been used to install spyware on target devices. There are other concerns about Android security and especially privacy. A study by Yale University concludes that about 3/4 of Android apps come with third-party tools that track users' activity. Forcepoint warns of a massive spam campaign that's distributing Scarab ransomware. The crooks sent out about 12 million infected emails over a 6-hour period. Ransomware is enjoying a burgeoning demand in the black market. Carbon Black has reported a 2,500% rise in ransomware sales since last year, so the hoods still seem to think this is the coming thing in crime. Ransomware is also growing more targeted and more difficult to detect. No one seems to be buying the whistling in the dark Uber did before its recent shakeup and breach disclosure. It strikes most observers as unlikely in the extreme that the criminals who hacked the ride service actually destroyed the data they stole. There had been speculation last week that the company's value would take a hit, and we now have a better idea of what the breach discount may be in this case. SoftBank's offer is out, and it seems to be about 30% lower than pre-disclosure expectations would have put it. Security analysts face a seemingly ever-increasing stream of available data, and separating the signal from the noise can be challenging. Properly dialing in what generates an alert and demands your attention can make all the difference in the world. Bryan Ware is CEO at Haystack Technology, and he shares techniques for using machine learning to help cut through the noise.
so often we discover that a breach has taken place months after that breach took place. When you think through that, then you realize that the data was there at the time that the breach was taking place. Maybe even there was some data there before the breach took place, but that data wasn't actionable. You couldn't make a decision from it. And so we're in this era of artificial intelligence and machine learning specifically, where there's a great opportunity to build algorithms that look for the kinds of anomalies or look for the kinds of changes that could be indications of some kind of a threat and something that you'd like to bring as an alert to an analyst or to a decision maker. So the approach that we've taken at Haystax is what we call our model first approach, and that is that we build models that represent what experts believe or what analysts would do if they were trying to evaluate, is this a real threat or not, or is this a suspicious event or not. And those models are very human and conceptual terms. It's a form of kind of AI that is called Bayesian networks. So these are probabilistic networks that represent the belief of experts and the uncertainties in those beliefs. And then once we have that model, then we can connect it to all those alerts that come from other machine learning approaches or specific pieces of data. And so what it allows us to do is to really operate at scale, in the sense that if you're generating potentially hundreds of thousands of events per day, you'd never want to have that many alerts. But if you could resolve them in the way that your analysts would and prioritize them according to the mental model they're going to use anyway, kind of after the fact, but you do it at the time of the event, at the time of the transaction, well, then you can build a really scalable system and you can just let the analysts see the ones that are of serious concern. The way I kind of describe that is that's building the physics of the problem space. What does a suspicious event look like? Or what does an insider threat look like? And once I've built that out, then I know how I would use data as it becomes available to determine the degree to which this person looks like an insider threat or the degree to which this looks like a suspicious transaction. So yes, we do have to ultimately connect it to all of that data, but it's not so much learning from the data as watching the data as it changes. And as the data changes, then the model updates as well, so that the beliefs change. So let me give you a really, really simple example.
Yeah.
We might say that an insider threat would be someone who comes into work at an unusual hour and prints documents that they don't usually have access to or wouldn't normally print to an unusual printer. And maybe there's a bunch of other little bitty things too. Now, it turns out that if you just built an alert on printing to an unusual printer, or if you just built an alert on printing a large file, or you just built an alert on came into work after 6 o'clock, then you'll end up, for any large company, with lots and lots of alerts that are almost always easily explained. The model that says, well, I would want to know about someone who's potentially thinking about leaving the firm and printing documents and coming into work at unusual hour. It's all together. I'd love to know that. But now, those are different kinds of data and different kinds of alerts. So we have the model that says, this is how I would fuse that together and how I would reason on it if I knew all of those things and maybe even some other things about this employee's performance. And then we have machine learned algorithms that basically say, well, what is the normal times that Bryan comes into work? And what are the normal places that he comes into work? And what doors does he go through? And what does he normally print? Those are all machine learned from the data. But the way that I combine all those different alerts is a model that, for the most part, is static for a pretty long period of time. It represents, what the experts, what analysts really, really believe. Now, we do learn some new things, and we do change our beliefs, and we learn some new indicators. For the most part, those models stay pretty stable, even though the data is changing constantly.
That's Bryan Ware from Haystax. In industry news, Akamai has announced that it's completed its acquisition of Immunio. Trend Micro announced that it's bought Immunio, a company that specializes in application security. It's thought that Trend Micro sees the acquisition as a way of moving its hybrid cloud security offerings into the DevOps market. Thoma Bravo is taking Barracuda Networks private. The private equity firm paid $1.6 billion for the company. Some analysts think this will be good for both buyer and seller. Barracuda may become more focused and agile, and Thoma Bravo may have picked up a business the markets tended to undervalue. And finally, there's been another international indictment in the U.S., this one of 3 Chinese nationals associated with the APT-3 cyber spying operation. The operation is also called BOYUSEC, short for the Guangzhou Boyu Information Technology Company, a contractor for the Ministry of State Security that's known for domestic surveillance of targets in Hong Kong. The U.S. regards the firm as basically a front for an espionage operation. The indictment charges the 3 BOYUSEC workers with theft of intellectual property belonging to Western aerospace and defense firms. The indictment mentions theft from Trimble, Siemens, and Moody's Analytics. And how did they get indicted? Through the hard work of the Pittsburgh FBI office. Alien Vault's Chris Doman reached out to us to share his appreciation for the Pittsburgh field office's work. He said, quote, "It's not a surprise this indictment comes from the FBI's Pittsburgh office. They have been very aggressive at going after cyber criminals," end quote. We agree. And to the Steel City G-Men, yins are doing a great job. Now I'd like to tell you about some research from our sponsor, Cylance. Good policy is informed by sound technical understanding. The crypto wars aren't over. Cylance would like to share some thoughts from ICIT on the surveillance state and censorship and about the conundrum of censorship legislation. They've concluded that recent efforts by governments to weaken encryption, introduce exploitable vulnerabilities into applications, and develop nation-state dragnet surveillance programs will do little to stymie the rise in terrorist attacks. These efforts will be a detriment to national security and only further exhaust law enforcement resources and obfuscate adversary communiques with a massive cloud of noise. Backdoors for the good guys means backdoors for the bad guys, and it's next to impossible to keep the lone wolves from hearing the howling of the pack. Go to Cylance.com and take a look at their blog for reflections on surveillance, censorship, and security. And we thank Cylance for sponsoring our show. And I'm pleased to be joined once again by Emily Wilson. She's the Director of Analysis at Terbium Labs. Emily, you were at a conference recently where the subject of the privacy of children came up, and it led to an interesting discussion. Why don't you share with us what happened?
I was at Cybersecurity Week in the Netherlands, and someone in the audience in a discussion raised the point that kids these days don't care about their data. Kids don't care. They're just giving all of their data away for free.
Right.
And one of the panelists pushed back on that, I thought appropriately, saying, we have protections in place for plenty of other aspects of kids' lives. We don't allow them to drive or to drink or to vote or to join the military until they are old enough to understand the implications and the consequences of their actions. So why are we treating data privacy like it's something different? And it is a hard thing to figure out how to solve, right? Partially because plenty of organizations are and have been collecting data on children for years, and we've already seen, some companies that specialize in devices for children having data breaches. But it's also, I don't think it's fair to characterize it as kids today don't care about their data when plenty of adults don't understand the implications of all of the data that they're sharing either.
And we sort of have this generational divide where the people who are setting policy are not digital natives, so this sort of thing isn't reflexive to them.
It isn't reflexive, but I also, and this was another point that one of the panelists made, we can't wait to look at best practices and regulations and data privacy and think about how this is impacting adults and children alike until we have digital natives in office or in positions of authority to help influence policy. These are decisions that we need to be making now. And I think the other question, something that I think about a lot is, when and how are we going to start seeing the fallout from some of this data? And not just data that's being shared, not just data that you're, putting in to sign up for some app, but in the work that I do, I am lucky enough to be working away from some of the more unpleasant parts of the dark web where children are exploited more directly, but I do see plenty of data leaks involving children. And I mean children, not university students. I mean children. Whether this is social security numbers of children being sold or data leaks from elementary schools. It's awful to see.
So we can understand beyond the obvious, the horrific things, the child exploitation, that sort of thing. Is there a particular value of personal identification of a PII of a child?
In some cases, right now, yes. The social security numbers, for example, very useful for tax fraud, for specific types of tax fraud. In other cases, and honestly, this is the part that makes it worse, is that people don't particularly care who data belongs to or where it comes from, as long as they can use it. And so you may have, the information for a 17-year-old being mixed in with the information for a 45-year-old. And, the difference is that one of those people is going to be checking their credit score more regularly. And
so the 10-year-old who gets their information breached may not know there was ever a problem until they're 16 and try to get a driver's license, or 18 and try to get a credit card, and their information's been out there for a decade. Exactly. And that's the kind of thing that I don't think we are seeing yet at scale, but I imagine we will start to see over the next, call it 10 years. And I don't know what that's going to look like, and I don't think many other people do either. But it's a question that's beginning to be raised, and I think that's good. All right. Emily Wilson, thanks for joining us. And that's the Cyberwire. Thanks to all of our sponsors for making the Cyberwire possible, especially to our sustaining sponsor, Cylance. To find out how Cylance can help protect you using artificial intelligence, visit Cylance.com. The Cyberwire podcast is produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technology. The podcast is produced by Pratt Street Media. Our editor is John Petrick. Social media editor is Jennifer Iben. Technical editor is Chris Russell. Executive editor is Peter Kilpie. And I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening.